Hi, I'm Chris Ying. This is another installment of a series we're calling Winning Mealtime. Today, we're gonna make biscuits. I'm not a biscuit professional. I've learned at the feet of some very good biscuit makers. This, and let me be very clear with you, is not Joshua Skenes, three-Michelin-star chef, formerly of Saison and Anglo. This is not his biscuit recipe, but do I have his biscuit recipe? Is it the basis for the biscuits I'm about to make? Does it use butter that I harvested from my own cow on a mountain? No. Is it made by the hands of somebody who, with the talent of a Josh? No. But that's all I'll say on that. These are not Josh's biscuits. 3 1/4 cups of cake flour to start out with. So cake flour is a lower protein flour that you are going to use for things like cakes because it develops less gluten because you don't want chewy biscuits, you don't want chewy cakes. 3 1/4 cups of cake flour and 1 1/3 cups of AP. So we're gonna mix all of our dry ingredients together. AP flour, cake flour, along with some salt. I like a salty biscuit. A tablespoon of sugar, teaspoon and a half baking soda, and call it 1 big heaping tablespoon of baking powder, and plus some. So step 1 is to get all our dry ingredients together and well incorporated. And listen, you can get lazy and just not combine everything. You can get lazy and just sort of throw wet and dry together, as I sometimes do. Unfortunately, it matters. Unfortunately, it will affect your results. And making sure all of these dry ingredients are well distributed before you incorporate the wet is a big deal. So just do it. Up next, let's get our wet ingredients, which consist of 1 egg, which I think is a little bit of an unusual ingredient. So again, this is not the Josh recipe by any means. He won't let me share his recipe. And here's one of the many reasons why this is not Josh's recipe. His recipe for biscuits says, when mixing your egg, be sure there's no aeration in the egg. So you see these little bubbles? This is unacceptable. This is why this is not gonna be a multi-Michelin star biscuit.
How would you go about having no aeration in eggs? To
you would
the
use
layperson?
a flatter whisk. Dave has one back there. And you just go slow. I don't know. Honestly, it's an instruction that seems physically impossible. And that's the magic of super, super, super high-end cooking, which is not what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to make it good enough so that our kids will get some calories in their bodies and Child Protective Services doesn't come knocking on our door because we didn't feed our kids. I need cream and buttermilk. 1 1/2 cups of cream. So that's 1. Got everything but a half, but hey, 2/4 is a half. And 3/4 cup of buttermilk. So buttermilk is gonna have the acidity. That's gonna help us activate the leavening properties of our baking soda, baking powder. Because acid and base make water, make it neutral. But in doing so, they produce carbon dioxide. Science! Okay, so I kept this butter very cold in the freezer, and I'm going to introduce it into this flour now. The reason why you keep your butter cold is because the flakiness of biscuits or pie doughs or anything like a short crust is all about the butter sort of interweaving into the dough or being laminated into the dough is why you have is what happens with croissants and things like that. It's a layer of flour with fat in between it, and that's what's going to yield the flakiness of a pastry, right? So as the butter melts away, what's left is like a pocket of air. You want to make sure that the butter doesn't melt in this process, because if it melts, then you just have it becomes one sort of homogeneous mass. This is our Thermomix. You do not have to use this. A food processor will work 100% as well as this will. This is just our very fancy version of a food processor with a computer in it and things like that, but I'm just using it as a food processor. So first things first, all of our dry ingredients into the bowl of a food processor. And you can do this by hand, as generations and generations of people before me have. You can cut the butter into your dough. I'm just not. This was another tip from legendary pie maker Lisa Donovan. She asked me to sort of cube her butter for her. And I cut it into sort of more precise cubes. And she was like, "What are you doing? I want weird shapes of butter to go into my thing. Because I want some big chunks and smaller chunks and irregularities." So I learned my lesson. So I made these biscuits. I made biscuits for my kids for the first time maybe a month ago. It hadn't occurred to me until then that biscuits might be something they like. But what's not to like? They like breads and pastries and cakey things. My daughter was very into biscuits and gravy. She was down with the full sausage gravy, drench the biscuit, black pepper, over the top rib stick and stuff. My son, with the same biscuits, not so much into the sausage gravy. Who would have thunk? But pile that up with some of grandma's jam. Whew. So I'm just gonna basically pulse this for not that long, just until you start to sort of, you can see, I don't know if you can. Yeah, so this is like pretty close to what I want. I want to still see some chunks in there, but you can sort of see it's like it's starting to clump, and that's it. That's basically all you need to happen. So I'm gonna move to you can do this in a bowl. I regret not doing this in a bowl. I regret doing this on the cutting board. So we'll introduce a little bit of the liquid in here. If you've ever made pasta dough, it's the same thing. You're not always gonna use the same amount of wet ingredients, because it's really gonna come down to like the humidity of the day, how much liquid the flour is actually gonna take. My daughter's recently started doing like a cooking class at school in the mornings. This series has been more about cooking for kids than with kids, just because I feel like cooking with kids is a very different pursuit. Like that's an activity, and mostly we've been talking about like the utility of getting calories into kids. But this is very obviously like any doughs, any breads or pastas or noodles are like a pretty perfect do it with your kids situation. This is gonna be a mess at your house when you do this with your kids. Here I'm gonna just move into hands here. You don't want to work this very much, and you don't want to manhandle it. Literally, don't manhandle it. Don't use your big hot man hands to melt all of that butter. It's like, this is not pizza. You're not trying to develop gluten, and you develop gluten when you work something like this. I want this thing just to come together without too much working. All right, so that's basically it. I'm not working it too much more than that. You can see there's still some unincorporated flour. I think that's okay. It's not a dough ball. You can see that it like tears more than it stretches, which is what we want. So again, I'm gonna try not to work this too much. Maybe sprinkle a little more flour on, just so we don't. And so you know that thing where you kind of like can pull the top off and pull a layer off and things like that? You know what I'm talking about? There's different floors to your biscuit. That comes from this next move, which is, if I can get it right. That comes from this move. I'm gonna fold it over like I'm folding a napkin. Nice tacky dough, not too dry. I'm gonna roll it out without too much crazy pressure. One more time out to, let's call it 1/2 inch. So you can do this basically the night before. The parent who makes biscuits like this from scratch on a weekday morning is the kind of parent you don't want to be friends with. I'm gonna start cutting biscuits. And then we're gonna pop this in the fridge. When I made these a month ago, I was pretty happily surprised by how long they kept decent, covered in a Tupperware and then reheated. So you can see I have some extra dough here. It's not gonna fit on this tray. We'll put it on another tray, but this will be our hero tray. You can reform this, roll it back out. The round 2 biscuit that comes from that sort of reformed dough is going to be a little chewier, a little more worked. But like, the kids can't tell. What are they, super tasters? Well, you think you're better than me? But yeah, don't waste that dough. I'll make another tray. But for right now, I'm gonna pop this into the refrigerator and let it chill for 45 minutes. Probably can go up to overnight. Then we're gonna brush it with some buttermilk and then it's gonna go in the oven. So it's been an hour. Our biscuits are chilled. I'm gonna dust off any flour that was still sitting on here. The oven is at 450, very hot. I'm gonna put a little bit of buttermilk into a bowl. Then we're gonna just create a little depression in each of these. I'm an expert at creating depression. I've been creating depression in myself for a long time. We're just gonna brush these with a little bit of buttermilk. All right, so a little buttermilk to help with some browning and a little flavor. Hot oven, 450. Coming in hot. Let's call that like 10, 12 minutes. In the meantime, again, my daughter's down with this, my son is not. We're gonna do some sausage gravy. So a log of sausage, straight in the pan. All right, that's a lot of gravy then. And I love, love, love this. I mean, I love sausage, period. But I really like breakfast sausage, and I like this Jimmy Dean's stuff or whatever it is. If you have an onion, great. If you don't, who cares? Don't worry about it. If I do my job correctly here, this will sync up. The sausage gravy will come together just as our biscuits are done. I know it's not the nice organic stuff, and I love a really well-made sausage, but sage breakfast sausage, unbelievable. I don't think I like sage anywhere else other than here and when we're doing seances and warding off witches and stuff. I'm terrified of witches. I paid a lot of money to a consulting agency to be like, what would make me more approachable? Like a fear of like an irrational Halloween character. So what I'm doing here with this gravy is a little hacky. This is not how you necessarily would always do it, but the thickening agent in this is gonna be a roux or flour. But I'm not gonna sort of cook the roux in the way you would properly do it, or how they would make a gumbo or something. We're gonna do it the hacky way, which is just to throw some flour on top of our ingredients and then add our liquid and avoid clumps with the power of stirring. So this is what I'm doing. I'm just gonna sprinkle flour right on top, distribute it. This needed butter. This might lead to clumpiness. We'll see. But a goodly amount of butter. Nah, we good. I'm also gonna add just a tiny bit of chicken bouillon. All right, so you can see that butter is melted, cooking the flour, cooking some rawness out of the flour this way. Onions, garlic, cooking out any rawness. And then we're gonna maybe add some black pepper. You can omit this if your kids are like very sensitive to spice, as I know some kids out there are like ultra anti-spice. A little sugar. And a little Worcestershire sauce. If you're more of a Asian household than a British household, fish sauce will do the same exact thing, which is to add umami. All right, so I'm gonna add a little water. If you have chicken stock or beef stock or any sort of stock laying around, you can use that instead. That's the only reason I added that chicken broth was, or that chicken bouillon was, I didn't have stock here. Having really nice stock on hand is so helpful. All right, milk. I bought a whole chicken last weekend. Broke it down. We used the breasts for chicken piccata. I used the legs and thighs to make karaage fried chicken, or maybe it was teriyaki. And then I cooked the hell out of the bones and wings to make a rich chicken broth that then found its way into everything all week long. That's like one of those magical little things that will just improve everything. And honestly, like the kids notice. They don't say, "Ooh, this has some stock in it." But there's a tremendous difference between, oh, I'm making vegetables, and instead of adding water and just steaming it in water, I added like a really rich chicken broth. And the kids, like, it's totally noticeable. Like the kids are just more willing to eat the vegetables that have, you know, a couple of tablespoons of chicken broth in them. So this is all to say, if you have chicken broth at home, you don't need to add the chicken bouillon. Just add some chicken broth. I really like the flavor of a black pepper gravy, so I'm adding more than I'm allowed to at home. But ain't no kids here. A little salt. It's been 17 minutes. I'm gonna sacrifice one to find out where we're at. This is the ugliest, flattest one anyway, so. Oh my God. They're little shortcakes. I'm gonna try pulling these off and letting these cool, but these are a delight. They smell so good. And this one's for Ruby. Split it. Some gravy. That's all she wrote. Look at that. Come on, man. But it's super useful to have a thing like this, a base food that you know both kids will eat, even if they're going to take it in two different ways. One will eat it with tons of sausage gravy. The other one wants a bunch of jam. But at the end of the day, you got them to eat a wholesome, calorie-rich, lots of dairy, lots of delightful starches and carbohydrates, a substantive thing that was not a candy bar or a popsicle or whatever. So I love biscuits for that reason. infinitely customizable. You can eat it however you like. They reheat pretty well. Let them cool on a rack. I just didn't have one here. Let them cool on a cooling rack and then pack them away in a Tupperware. But this super useful in the battle against your children at the in a very useful winning strategy for winning mealtime, I should say. We will continue to fight that good fight here on Winning Mealtime. Poke around this channel and you'll find more useful strategies and recipes for feeding your children food so you don't get arrested. Talk to you soon.